A problem that these pistols had, or that Hudson approached, was how do we put a 1911-like trigger into a striker-fired gun, a simplified striker-fired gun. They wanted to replicate that straight back and forth trigger pull in a striker-fired gun, which the industry had demanded at the time.
What is up, everybody? I tell you what, if there's one thing we like around here at Vortex, it is cool guns. Yeah, Adam Maxwell on the mic here, joining me today for a tale of two pistols. Adam, we have four on the table, but I think they're going to help tell the story that we're trying to tell.
We love telling stories.
Kind of an interesting one with this one here. We're talking about the, I guess, the H9s, plural.
Yes.
One of them, the original Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
The other, I guess, the current, still in production.
Yes, recently launched.
Daniel Defense
H9. Yes.
Give us the scoop on these things, Adam. Well, we were talking, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and I always come on, tap you on the shoulder. I'm like, hey, you got any ideas for cool podcasts? You guys are in the know. You're in the mix.
Yeah. Got cool stuff.
And you're like, well, how about this? And I was like, oh, dude, that sounds super interesting. Let's do it. And here we are.
Yeah. So the H9, really, like, as we've established in other episodes, I'm a big 1911 guy. All right. So I love it. It's what I use all the time for all the things. But as like the industry moved out of the 80s through the 90s, the law enforcement tactical world really kind of moved away from this gun. A high fit and finish, hand assembled, hand fit kind of gun. Although still used or was used for up until pretty recently, and still in some respects, with like tier 1 units. But more and more as time went on and we were issuing pistols to lay people, pistol design went more the way of the Glock pistol and its derivatives. Polymer frame, mass produced, no hand fit parts essentially. Much simplified, much easier to take apart. Passive safeties, right? I think that was the big thing for the pistol, was we put all the safeties in the trigger, where there was somewhat of a training component to a 1911, where there was a manual grip safety, which may or may not fit your hand, depending what your hand is like and what particular build of 1911 you have. And then there is the whole thumb safety, which as two-handed pistol shooting was kind of a new thing and evolving through the 70s and the 80s. But like taking the safety off thing was kind of, it was a training concern, especially for when you start to think about a department of people. Like I say, in the law enforcement space, a lot of law enforcement professionals feel about guns the way firemen feel about hoses. Like it's just a tool that they use. They're not particularly interested in how it works or being proficient with it beyond what's required. So what really made the Glock pistol popular and its derivatives was it simplified an auto pistol so that there weren't any manual safeties, there weren't any manual buttons. Everything was passive to the gun, and they were cheap because they're mass producible at large quantities, and they can just spit these things out. But what we gave up along the way was some of the precision that some of the shooting public and the tactical world wanted from a match grade 1911 pistol. One of the things we gave up when we went to a striker fired gun and we put all those safeties in the trigger is we gave up the 1911 trigger pull. That's what keeps it around to this day is it's often imitated, never duplicated so far. But when they move to a pistol like this, and pretty much any other semi-auto pistol, it pivots on a fulcrum. So all the triggers, there's a pin on the top, and as you press it, it pivots to the rear, and then it goes off. So we have it pivoting on a fulcrum. It has to move a certain amount of space, and good pistol shooting is somewhat dependent on being able to press the trigger straight to the rear without disturbing the gun. So if you introduce an arc in there off axis of the direction that you're trying to press the trigger, that's influence on the gun. And then there was the actual, like, what the trigger felt like itself. And then at the same time, we needed a gun that was safe should it be dropped. Since there were no manual safeties, we need all the safeties to engage on their own. So the idea of a Glock pistol is when you put it down, all the safeties were engaged. If you picked it up and tried to press the trigger, it would go off. Not necessarily the case with the 1911. So a problem that these pistols had, or that Hudson approached, was how do we put a 1911-like trigger into a striker-fired gun, a simplified striker-fired gun. And they also, one of the other things that made a 1911 very prevalent was it sits really low in your hand. So the bore axis of the gun is really low to your hand, which people who shoot at a high level would prefer. Some designs at the time, now the Glock sits pretty low, but there are a lot of designs at the time that sat very high. Like a 226, a SIG 226 would be a good example. So they wanted super low bore axis, and they wanted to somehow put a 1911-like trigger into a striker-fired gun. And what makes a 1911 trigger, aside from just being a single-action trigger, is it travels straight in a track. So it moves straight back and forth horizontally, parallel to the barrel.
It kind of looks like a pocket door.
Yeah. Yep, there's a little pocket, and this thing, it's actually a fairly unimpressive piece of metal that goes in there. But yeah, it travels straight back and forth in a track, and then back towards the back strap of the pistol is where it actually pushes on the sear and releases the hammer. So they wanted to replicate that straight back and forth trigger pull in a striker-fired gun, which the industry had demanded at the time. This was seen as overcomplicated, more service-intensive as far as maintenance, less tolerant of abuse and grime. So they were trying to make a striker-fired 1911-esque pistol. And so when I was working retail sales, just before I came to Vortex, a concept pistol that came out was the Hudson. It was a brand new company at the time. You really only could see pictures of it on the internet, on their website. A few of us had pre-ordered these before they were released. But it was a new, hyped-up concept pistol. And they come around once in a while. But the thought being, this was a steel frame pistol, striker fired, held, I think this holds about 13 or 15 rounds.
I think it's 13.
Yeah, 13 rounds in the original magazine. So it had some higher capacity, 9mm, and it essentially put together striker fired into something that felt like a higher capacity 1911. And honestly, like, being as much of a 1911 guy as I am, and certainly was at the time, this is probably the first pistol since the 1911 that I really got excited about.
Sure.
And I think it's probably, to me, it's if not one of the more innovative designs since the Glock pistol. So Glock innovated on essentially mass production and passive safeties, and then bringing that concept into something that melted what we liked and left behind in a 1911 into something that could be some kind of hybrid pistol. So the concept of it is that this striker-fired trigger also travels straight back and forth in a track like a 1911 trigger. It has the passive safeties in it like a Glock, and most notable, what people notice first is that the trigger safety, the one that's synonymous with the Glock pistol that pivots back and forth, that sticks out, what that's for is essentially to prevent the inertia of the trigger from pulling itself if it were dropped, because an object in motion stays in motion. So essentially, having that extra little spring-loaded dingus on there puts another access into the pull. So you kind of have to pull it in a couple different directions, which your finger just does when it contracts. But the most notable thing that people notice about it is that the trigger safety pivots from the bottom instead of from the top. and then it travels in that straight line. And it also sits lower to your hand. The bore axis sits super low in your hand, similar to a 1911. It actually sits much lower than a 1911. Maybe I was watching some videos. It looks like if you line the frames up, it looks like maybe 3/8 of an inch or so. Like there's actually a fair amount of material on a 1911 above the frame. Where this one sits super low into your hand. So here we have something that had a trigger, like I liked. It was striker fired, like the industry was demanding, and it was steel framed, so it still feels like a gun. Like a lot of the polymer frame guns, I don't love them. To me, I put them in the same category as staple guns, right? Like, I mean, staple guns shoot staples, and that's about all that's remarkable about them. But this still felt like a precision marksmanship instrument and took a higher capacity magazine. If there was a gun that was going to move me off of 1911s, I was convinced that this was going to be it. And I was one of the first people in line to get one of these.
I mean, on the surface, it does appear to be kind of like that best of both worlds. If you are into the 1911 like you are, you're used to it, and like you said, you have this polymer striker-fired trend. I know this isn't a poly gun, but you're like, oh, I'm getting some of these modern features with some classic ones that I like as well.
Yep. Simplified disassembly, so it came apart in fewer pieces and things like that. And
compared to the 1911.
Compared to a 1911.
Yeah. Now, talk a little bit about why that lower bore axis is desirable, though.
Because what we perceive as recoil, when you shoot a gun and there is recoil, that is an action-reaction thing as well. We're shooting something out the barrel. We're sending energy out the barrel, so something equal and opposite is going to hit your hand. Recoil and the way it manifests itself is the path of least resistance for that energy to leave, because energy is neither lost nor created. It just changes form. So it is going to leave the system path of least resistance. And the way a pistol sits, especially a semi-auto pistol, because they have to cycle back and forth, the extent to which it sits over your wrist is the mechanical advantage it has over you to roll and create what we perceive as the arc of recoil. If we could clamp the gun above the center of the bore, it would recoil much differently. But because it has a mechanical advantage over you, it rolls up and back. The closer the bore is to the center line of your hand, the less leverage the gun has on you, and that is what creates the quote-unquote flat recoil impulse that's desirable in so many guns and that everyone's chasing. So they were essentially trying to manipulate the way this recoil impulse hit your hand, and it is tangibly different. The recoil does hit your hand a lot lower than it does on any other pistol that I've really shot. And part of the way they did that is they mounted the recoil spring in here super low, so there's a little bit different geometry in how this all recoils and unlocks and relocks, which gives it the unique look, but it sits lower in your hand, and then they did a little bit different interpretation on how a recoil system is inside there.
It's a novel concept.
Yeah, and 2017, this was the rage at SHOT Show. Every year there's kind of one or two products that are the buzz of SHOT Show. Man, you couldn't get within 50 feet of this booth because everybody wanted to see this gun. I think I was there that year, and I think I went looking for it. I never even found it.
Which is a definite possibility.
It was definitely like Atlantis that year, and we were just looking, and we never really found it.
I mean, I agree. I think your interpretation of it being kind of like the next big thing at the time was it seemed legitimately new and innovative. You know?
Like a lot of things that launched at SHOT Show, it took a while for them to actually come out. They had to make some. And like I said, I had actually started working at Vortex here before it actually came out, so I was not at the gun store anymore that I ordered this. So it finally came, and I went home and I transferred it because I hadn't changed residence yet. And I was carrying this for a while. I was using it. I shot a couple matches with it, and this was my gun that I was super excited about. Like, wow, I can put the 1911s down now, and like this is the new thing. come around. I don't know if it was the next year, but it was certainly in short succession thereafter. They started to. This is the only model they made. The H9 was the steel frame one was the only one they made. And then there was talk of one of the things when all the online talking heads about guns were talking, they're like, oh, well, this would be great, but it's too heavy. It's steel. We want one in aluminum. And then also at the time, like this one only came with iron sights at the time, which 2017, 2016, it was okay at that time for a gun not to be configured with optical plates. Like
right.
It was not expected standard equipment like it is now. So they were announced that upcoming soon, we will have an aluminum frame and we will have optics ready slides coming soon. And a lot of people said, great, I'll wait, which is horrible for revenue. So like sales really fell off from what I understand when people decided to wait for the aluminum frame where I'm at an optics company. I want the optics ready version to do optic things with it, waiting on that. And so it's kind of like if they announced that if you were in the market to buy a car and they announced next month there will be huge factory incentives and discounts on all late model cars. Well, guess what? You're going to wait 30 days and see what. Same thing. Meanwhile, they were starting to discover some quality issues with the pistol, specifically the extractor and the slide stop. Due in no small part to the slide velocity, the actual spring rate that they have on the slide. This slide moves very fast, so it was very abusive to the slide stop, or the not the slide stop. I think is the actual takedown pin there, but the pin that holds it all together, and then the extractor. An extractor, if your case is under a bunch of pressure and it's trying to rip, if you're trying to extract the case before the bullet has left, which is kind of a timing issue. That puts a lot of strain on the extractor, and the extractors would break. So they had a lot of overhead in warranty repairs on the guns because guns were coming back. They were having to fix them.
I mean, it sounded to me like around that 2,000 round mark is where some of these wear issues were starting to show up.
Right. Yep. And I know people, this one never went back. I do know people from the store that I was working with that they did send their guns back to get fixed. And it all came crashing down, and the company went under, and basically, like, the guns that were there were, like, lost to time. Like, people had their guns, like, waiting in inventory, and they never got them back, and they never got any kind of compensation for them. They just disappeared.
I mean, it sounded a little bit like just like an unfortunate perfect storm and a bit of a mess. Like you said, you've made this announcement.
Mm-hmm.
People are waiting to buy guns. They're not buying your current guns. Yep. People are sending in guns to be fixed.
Oh, yeah.
And you are lacking the monies to really do any of it. And like you said, I mean, people sent back their guns and never saw them again.
Yeah. And on top of, I mean, just in concept, it is hard to be an upstart company. Like,
most don't make it.
Yeah. Most small businesses don't make it. Like, start a lemonade stand and see how hard that is. Like, it's difficult. And so that is what happened to this gun. They were largely discontinued. Some of their vendors, their parts vendors, would still make the parts. I think KE Arms for a while, they were one of the vendors, and it was kind of known if you had a Hudson and you needed a part, they might be able to get you some parts. Some dudes bought multiples of them. Like when they went discontinued, they bought multiple samples of them so they could have parts guns. I did not. I have a sample of one. I shot it a bit when I first got it. So I don't know where I am on the counter of 2,000 rounds for this gun, but I would say it has for sure a few hundred on it. I would reasonably estimate less than 1,000 on it. But since it was discontinued and it was known that they're kind of fragile and you can't get the parts anymore, I really have not shot it much anymore. I'm kind of scared to shoot it. Not that because I'm afraid it's dangerous. It's a cool gun, and if I break it, it's kind of like having like a rare German Luger. Like, I mean, if you break it, it's you wrecked it,
right?
And that's just they don't make Luger parts anymore. So that's the original that they make. Shoots awesome. I really liked it. I was gonna like do some serious production action in USPSA with this thing. I got a bunch of the magazines. I was ready to drop them on the ground. Actually, what keeps me from using this a whole lot is dropping the magazines on the ground and breaking that base plate on the bottom. Because I figure if that base plate breaks, then I don't have a magazine anymore that I can't replace. Truth be told, this one does not shoot accuracy-wise, does not shoot very well. Because this one, like, bullets would tumble. And I think, so like the bullets that we had at the time, from what I remember, it was not stabilizing. I think it was the 115 grain bullets. And that would later come out in the Daniel Defense pistol too.
Right.
But bullets that had the lighter weight bullets. If you look at a 147 grain 9mm bullet next to a 115 grain, because the 115 grain has so much less material, it's a lot more peaky. It's a lot more pointed.
Right.
Which also means there's a lot less bearing surface on the rifling as the barrel is spinning it. And those bullets with a lower or smaller bearing surface didn't stabilize as well in these guns. But that is my last impression of shooting it. I remember I was shooting it at a public range around here, and I was like, man, that thing doesn't group very good. We should figure that out. I was shooting hand loads. I'm like, man, what's wrong with these reloads and all that stuff. But the company went out of business. So largely, I just kind of have it now, which is kind of unfortunate. It's like I'm afraid to shoot it because I don't want to break it.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're not going to shoot it, why do you have it?
But you're kind of stuck.
It's kind of it's a gun, so you're supposed to shoot. So anyway, it's cool. And when all that happened, and when the doors closed, the rumor in the industry that I had actually heard fairly early from a fairly solid source was that Daniel Defense had bought all of the intellectual property for the pistol, because at the time they were a rifle company.
Mm-hmm.
They had, I feel like they felt like they had kind of done what they were going to do in rifling. They were looking for new horizons. They're like, oh, we should do a pistol. And like, here's a pistol design that people are excited about, and we can buy it cents on the dollar. Easy button, right?
It seems like the ultimate plug and play.
Right. It's like, oh man, we'll just grab it, we'll spark it Daniel Defense, we'll polish it up a little bit, we'll fix the things that need fixing, and it'll be good to go. I have some pictures, some very early prototype pictures of Daniel Defense renderings of this gun from the interim years where there were no H9 pistols. And my joke was with this person is that I wanted one for every year they made me wait for another one, and that would be a few. But eventually Daniel Defense did come out with their version of, also named the H9.
It is pretty crazy to think about that wait time. Them purchasing that IP,
mm-hmm.
like I think that's exactly what you're just like, was shortly thereafter the closing the doors. Like, this wasn't like way down the road.
Yep.
And like I said, on the surface seemed like a plug and play. In practice, I'm not sure it was.
Right. Because I think, from what I understand, the research that I did from people who had sources at Daniel Defense, they kind of got under the hood of this gun and said, ooh, there's some like engineering stuff we need to redo in here. Maybe some materials we need to do different, some geometries we need to do different.
A little quirky.
So it went from plug and play to complete redesign. And I'm guessing, I'm just from inference, I'm guessing they're like, well, we've come this far. we got to get this thing across the finish line.
There's that, and I will say the original concept and what got people so excited, incredibly sound.
Yes.
It's just how do we do it?
Yep.
And how do we do it maybe better, safely, more reliably?
Yep.
All the things.
Yeah,
all the things that you need a pistol to be.
How do we make one that we're going to stake our brand on, that we're willing to warranty, that we can manufacture at the volumes we need to make it profitable? And so...
Well, and you mentioned, kind of drop safe earlier. To my understanding, that was one of the things that they discovered when they were, analyzing this, and that they had to overcome with the new Daniel Defense version, which they did.
Yep. That's what some sources say. Like, a lot of times when drop safe is tested, they will just drop it 100% vertically. And this has, I pronounced beaver tail. So when the beaver tail hits first, it's going to pivot one way or the other, and that's going to essentially break the line of inertia for the gun to discharge. And it required that. It required the perfect drop and some parts to be like just on the right/wrong side of the manufacturing tolerance, so stacking tolerances had to be just kind of the right way. They kind of like the 320 pistol. If you dropped it at a bit of an angle, supposedly you could get them to go off. So Daniel Defense had to re-engineer that as well. And then, so essentially they re-engineered something that conceptually looks very similar. Like, you could look at the two and be like, yes, these are related. But from what I understand, there's only one part in common between the two pistols, and I think it's like a pin. It's a very inconsequential part, including the magazine. The magazines are different too. OG Hudson magazines will work in the Daniel, but not the other way around, because they also scaled this pistol a bit smaller. The original Hudson was more of a service pistol, like a Glock 17 size pistol, and what Daniel executed is more of a Glock 19 size pistol, which we have a representation here on the table. So kind of that mid-size, concealed carry / like kind of that intermediate size pistol, which is probably a solid move. Like, if you're going to have one SKU of a pistol, which currently they only have one size of it, it's probably a smart play. You can check a lot of boxes with the gun. But in concept, it's the same thing. So we have the trigger that we wanted. We have the low bore axis that we wanted. And essentially the thing has been completely re-engineered.
I really like a lot of what they did with that. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are looking for, hey, I want a pistol that I want to shoot a lot. Maybe I'm going to be doing some competition with it. I want to be able to carry it. Part of that reason being the gun that I carry, I want to be the gun that I shoot a lot.
Yep.
So, and I think they did a really, really nice job with scaling it down just enough.
Yep.
One thing, part of that scaled down-ness of it, you can see here, what is this, Adam? Would this be like the dust cover?
The dust cover. Yep.
You can see it's definitely more pronounced, extends pretty low here on the original Hudson.
Yep.
Not so much on the new Daniel Defense. Both are equipped to, whatever. You put a light on it, put a laser on it, go to. But my understanding with the original Hudson is, if you did that, you created some interference problems.
Yeah, well,
with the user.
Yeah, the light would sit so low. Like, if you just put a conventional flashlight on here right now, like the light sat so low that you couldn't reach it with your finger. Like, you had an access issue with,
or maybe not an interference, but an access. Yeah.
Yep, access. And then the biggest challenge on these was holster compatibility. To make a holster, I actually have some holsters custom made for this. LAG did some for me because I had a friend there. But he kind of didn't want to do it. There was something about this geometry that's tricky for holsters in Kydex, and it's so different than most common pistol designs. Like, there's a lot of pistols where like, oh yeah, well, you could get this kind of holster model, and it would fit a few. That like doesn't work with Hudson's, and none of the OG Hudson holsters fit the Daniel Defense pistol. So they have that low slung recoil system in there, but they sort of abbreviated it and accomplished the same thing. But they also, in doing so, brought the rail up higher so that the shooter's finger could index light accessories on the rail. And then they simplified disassembly as well. It disassembles much like a Glock. So, they'll dry fire it and then pull back a little bit, and you pull down on some tabs and the whole thing kind of comes apart. So it's very Glock-like in that sense, but it's a completely metal-framed pistol.
And does that have dual recoil springs then? Yeah?
Yes. Yep. Very, very similar to most striker-fired pistols contemporarily. 15-round magazine. So in a smaller magazine, they fit more bullets.
That's what I was going to mention. Again, that seems like just all pluses, right?
Yeah. I think it's loosely based on a Smith & Wesson 5506 or something like that. It's an old school double action Smith & Wesson tube, but I also think they kind of had to depart quite a ways from that, because what a lot of people don't understand is that for a magazine to fit in a now traditional wide body striker fired gun, where the trigger pivots on top, they don't have to fit the magazine through a trigger bow. So the magazine has to be skinny enough that the trigger mechanism can fit on both sides of it to actuate, which fenced them in from using a lot of commonly available magazines. They couldn't just use a Glock magazine or an M&P magazine because those were too wide. So they needed a skinnier magazine base, and then it sounded like they reworked some of the geometry so that they could fit 2 more rounds in a magazine that is essentially a half-inch-ish shorter. So redesigned magazine. If I were guessing, it's probably of Mech-Gar origin, like many OEM magazines are. But it's made out of a good material with a good slick coating on it for low friction, so they come out nice. And comes optics ready out of the box, so we love that. Instead of coming with a lot of plates like a lot of other striker fire guns do, essentially this one comes with a scan code, and you essentially get 1 free plate with the purchase of a pistol. So you scan it, you select which one you want, and they send it. And I got it in about a week.
Okay. Kind of an extra step there, but
yep.
I guess efficient at the same time, you know.
And I've only shot it with an optic on it, so I got the Delta Point plate, put a Defender ST on it, and then there are a couple holster companies supporting it right now. Just so happens that one that I like makes an appendix holster for it, so I have.
Which one is that? Just out of curiosity.
That's G-Code.
Okay.
And G-Code doesn't make them in all of their models. There's like one model that they make it in, so that's kind of weird too. But G-Code does.
Definitely a consideration, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the next thing. Like, if there was a thing that was going to stunt the success of this design, it would be accessory support. Because if you got this as a carry gun, the next step is, well, how do I carry it? So you need holster support, you need light support, you need magazines. If you want to put a light on it, does that holster company support the particular type of light that you want to put on it? That kind of stuff. So if this pistol has a challenge, it's that it is so different that the aftermarket needs to decide if they're going to support it or not. But it's a super cool gun. The original ones had polygonal rifling, like Glock pistols and HKs and stuff like that do. The thought being that is,
I think it was just accuracy, right?
Yeah,
That's known to be more
scientifically, like that's the best way to seal behind the bullet and get the best, the most efficient use of the powder and get the best velocity. But they ran into people who bought the guns. They shot the cheapest 115s they could find, and those had a propensity to tumble. So The reason it took me a little while to get one, when I was talking to my guys at shows, they were like, maybe don't get one yet. They were working through the barrel stuff, and so this one has the updated barrel, the conventionally rifled barrel, which is supposed to be more widely compatible with.
I think it's just cut rifling, right?
Yep, just cut rifling. So more universally compatible now, but it's a super cool gun that's not really a whole lot out there that's like it. So ambidextrous on both sides. You can reverse the release from the left-handed episode, so you can. I don't, because reasons. You'll have to listen to that episode to.
You just checked my right
to find out.
You just checked my last 2 boxes, which I think is cool. You may have mentioned it already, but Daniel Defense did achieve the aluminum.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they came out straight out the gate with the aluminum. So yeah, they are light. It is lighter than the OG is. I have been getting my girlfriend to shoot a little bit now, and I've handed her different stuff. This is the first one that got the good thumbs up for fitting in female hands, simple to use, a trigger that's easy to do well with. It's not an intimidating size. It's not overly heavy. Think of like some of the competition like 2011s we've rolled in here. Like that's a big gun to hold up. So yeah, it's a great all-purpose kind of concealed carry. I would even say duty use. A lot of people carry more of the mid-frame size guns, especially if they're in some kind of plainclothes role. I would absolutely shoot it at carry optics if I could. I'm actually leaning on one of my friends that does competition holsters. Like, hey, would you mold one for this thing? And he's kind of like, I'm super busy. Maybe if you give it to me for like a long time. So we're still working on that.
But I think it's going to take requests like yours.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To create it's kind of like a chicken egg scenario, right?
Yep.
The guys don't want to make the accessories till there's the demand, and the guys don't want to get the pistol until they're making the accessories.
Yep.
It's a tricky spot.
Yeah. And the word has to get out too. Like a lot of the videos I've watched on this, when I watch people review guns, especially handguns nowadays, all I see is the equivalent of college kids reviewing beer. Like when I was in college, all my friends, like, to them, the best beer in the world was the cheapest beer they could buy that got the effect. And so that's like when people review guns, they're like, oh, yeah, it's super cheap, and it goes bang every time, and I dragged it behind my pickup truck. And so I was like, well, here's something that's refined, and you hand something refined to the stereotypical college kid. They're like, oh, well, I don't need this. You know, it's just like, I mean, I could get the same for cheaper.
Right.
It's like, well, that's not really the point. It's not really the point. You could get something modern with a refined trigger, simplified construction, mass producible, slim.
I was going to say pretty slim profile.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So that's really, to me, this pistol is all the best parts of a 1911 and a Glock 19 put together. Especially like the Glock 19 23 sized gun is kind of widely praised as like the Goldilocks size, especially like in the concealed carry / self-defense role. So like it is kind of all of what made both pistols successful at, it's not a cheap gun, but I would say it's at the intermediate attainable price for what you can expect to pay for a pistol.
Is MSRP around 18 or something like that?
Mm-hmm. So I think street price, you'd probably be around 15 or something like that, which that's what you would pay for a good 1911 or a good CZ, like a Shadow 2 or anything HK, it seems like. So,
but also contrast that with like a Gen 5 Glock 19
in like the $600 range, like you are spending more. Absolutely.
But slightly more refined pistol.
More refined, yep.
Now, it is heavier.
Mm-hmm.
From a shootability perspective, you know, I mean, I'm sure you've shot, your typical poly pistols. I'm sure you've shot a ton of them, right?
Oh yeah.
How does something like this compare to that?
I would say like most polymer guns, not that they're bad, it's just like most polymer guns, I'm just not enamored with spending a lot of time with them. I can be successful with them, but like there's a lot of vibration and flex, and they're very crude. This kind of gives me everything, all the benefits of those guns, but it's still, like I said, it feels like a gun. So it's not rattly. It's very smooth. It tracks very straight. It locks up tight. So the recoil impulse on it is very smooth, and it hits low in my hand. It has that kind of positive feel of a metal gun. You see even a lot of the polymer frame designs coming out with a metal framed version now. We've seen that in Walther and Smith & Wesson and whatnot. They've taken proven polymer frame designs and made metal frames, so they kind of get the heft that the American market wants without being heavy.
Right. Well, and with that little, I guess, extra heft and just the sheer mass of it, I guess my question was, does it just sit better? Is it less affected by...
It does pretty much sit. For a mid-frame size gun, it really does just kind of sit in my hand.
And then what are your thoughts for concealed carry? Because I could definitely see this being used for that application. I think it was designed for that application, we talked about. I mean, I think it's to be that perfect do-all blend. Is that extra weight problematic at all?
No, but you have to consider that I'm a guy that has no problem carrying a 5-inch 1911. So,
am I talking to the wrong guy?
You are talking to the wrong guy about that. I would absolutely have it. I kind of just got this through kind of my initial play with it, break it in phase. So I have about 1,000 rounds on this gun, and I would absolutely say this one's probably going to be in the rotation, as they would say. I don't hard commit on I have one carry gun. I'm a gun guy, so I carry lots of guns depending on the mood. But I would definitely say this one is in the running if it doesn't get kidnapped by my significant other, and I would have to buy another one.
Shoot!
Oh, dang it!
His and hers matching pistols.
But yeah, I would say that's probably in danger of happening with this one.
Yeah, it's neat.
I like
it. I wasn't really aware of it until you brought it up, and the more that I dug into it, I was like, oh, this thing is cool.
It's kind of like, why don't more people know about this?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it hit the market, and then the buzz was gone before it actually got into customers' hands. And I don't know, we're gonna make the H9 great. I think more people need to try it out.
I'd be surprised if it, I would speculate you are going to start seeing that aftermarket support for it.
Mm-hmm. I would think so too, especially if you have a company like Daniel Defense behind it.
Right.
And especially if they branch out into more sizes. And then I really think it would catch fire if Daniel Defense submitted it to some kind of pistol trial and it won. So if a major agency adopted it and said, we want this, an agency that would have clout to go to a holster manufacturer and say, you will make us 3,000 holsters, and they're like, okay, well, that we can make a mold for that.
Right.
So I think if it is successful in a trial or something like that, I think that would really get the momentum going on the accessory market for something like this.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking pre-podcast a little bit, and I'm kind of dabbling in the market for a new carry gun, something a little more modern, something that's cut for or built to accommodate optics. And I've got 4 or 5 things. I'm like, oh, I like this about that one. I like this about that one. Then you told me about this one. I'm like, oh, I like a lot about that one too. But there's some stuff that I'm maybe a little bit unsure. It probably takes shooting all of them and sorting them out a little bit.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it definitely made my list of, I should probably consider this one.
Oh yeah. And like I said, I mean, there's a lot of times where people have said oh yeah, we took the best of this and the best of that, and this is that product. But I think this is the closest manifestation to really taking the best of a Glock pistol and what I like about it, and the best of a 1911 pistol and what I like about it, and putting it together in some sort of commercially viable product.
Cool, man.
So like I said, I think to me, it is the most interesting pistol innovation in evolution of pistol design since the Glock pistol. Like everything that's come out in the last, 30 years, it just kind of, it doesn't scream innovation or evolution. It seems like most of them are just copying something that's already been successful and rebranding it subtly. So where this is really like a clean sheet of paper. How do we do a handgun in a new way?
Yeah. I do. Well, number one, I'll say that, again, I've no, I guess, like range experience with this pistol, but just hearing you talk about it and what I've looked at, Daniel Defense did an absolutely phenomenal job with carrying on, I guess, what you'd say is like, was the original mission of this pistol, actually making it a heck of a lot better, in my opinion. But I do wonder, though, like, what could have been, what would have been.
Oh, absolutely.
Had Hudson just not announced the aluminum version, would they have been able to keep selling pistols, weather the storm, right? Which a lot of companies, you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have some issues along the way, and there's going to be some bumps, right? That's any company, like you said, particularly a startup that actually, what an amazing job.
Oh, yeah. Well, like their original concept for the magazine, they were going to push them out through the major distributors, and they had like a hard stop on, like, they had to be less than $30, I think, or $40.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
For a magazine. And he's like that in an interview that he did, the original owner. He's like, that was a hard pill to swallow for an upstart company, because accessories is where you make the money. In selling, it's not in the guns, it's in all the stuff around the guns. Right. So like here, if you're going lean on the accessories, but also it's equally hard for a pistol design to be successful if the magazines aren't readily attainable. Like I think that's maybe what hindered a lot of the success of HK pistols in the US. Like the magazines were expensive and they were hard to get. But I think if we were to speculate, from what I understand, they closed their doors in 2019.
Yep.
If they could have held on for one more year, 2020, the COVID year, the gun industry went nuts.
It broke loose.
It went nuts, man. If it
would you say particularly handguns?
Particularly handguns. So I think if they would have held on just a little bit longer, or if they could have, and it's not like they're quit. I don't know if they're just, not saying they're quitters or anything, but man, if they would have had the working capital to hold on one more year, I think it would be a completely different story. I think they would still be around today. There would be multiple sizes, shapes, configurations of H9, and I think the landscape of handguns would look a bit different.
I think that they weather that storm, which sounds like it was definitely a tough one. But if they did, I think they're a household name, and luckily, I guess in a lot of ways, like I'm super happy for Daniel Defense picking up the torch, carrying
it,
and frankly making a better torch at the end of the day.
It is super cool that they picked it up and ran with it, and it didn't just die. And some big contracts have been awarded since then. Like the Glock 47, there was no Glock 47 really, or it was kind of a agency only thing in that era. Like if Hudson would have hooked that contract, it would look very different today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you being such a 1911 fan, like you really had no other recourse but to, at the time, buy the original Hudson.
Had to be done.
And then you really weren't left an option when Daniel Defense came out with this one.
Yep. Especially we run into each other all the time on the law enforcement conference circuit. It's like, hey man, you guys come out with that yet? Oh, not yet. But got one now. One now.
Well, we're basically making a brand new pistol that's kind of like the old. It's weird though, because like it's so much like the original, and yet so very, very different.
Yeah.
At the same time,
it's not a reprint. Like it's pretty different. Like engineering wise, The parts and especially in how you take them apart is completely different.
Should we cover that real quick? I mean, that's kind of interesting. Well, and this here is kind of a little bit tricky, yeah?
I think so. I think I remember how to do it. This one, the Daniel one, comes apart just like a Glock pistol does.
Right.
And it's still dirty from when I shot it last. This one,
Bing,
how
bang,
do I
boom.
remember? I think you lock it open,
And then
push
you really
this
have to,
pin out.
but you got to, give her. Maybe we don't even want to do that right now. Adam, no. Okay.
I just need something harder than my finger. And then you rotate that, and then it comes apart, I think. Maybe. We're doing it live. There we go.
Oh, there you go. I mean, like you said, you haven't really futzed with this thing in a long time.
Yeah, so
can we see the difference in
the barrels are significantly different.
Yeah.
The way the geometry of the lockup on the barrels works, significantly different. The recoil spring is captive to the frame.
So right now you have the original.
Yeah. So the original, it just kind of sticks out there.
Right.
Where it's a captured unit similar to what we would be used to on a M&P or something like that.
Well, and so with that down where it's at, that's what kind of created that extra, and Daniel Defense was able to move that up.
Yep.
It's interesting, too, because some of the unique features of the original.
Or even if you look at the profile, just like the diameter of the barrels is really different.
Yeah.
The Daniel's a lot thicker.
But some of the unique features of the original are actually what Daniel Defense moved away from, but it made it better.
Yep. I think they I think their engineers maybe took it a step or two further and well, we don't have to do I think they found other ways to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it.
With more conventional products, or not product, but parts. I think this recoil system is easier to make, and probably cheaper also. So,
but doing the same thing as good, or better. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool, man. Well, that's all I got.
Yeah, sweet guns, but on a cool gun episode, here is a cool gun.
It is a very cool gun, man. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I appreciate you bringing it out.
Absolutely.
And chatting with us about it today. Super cool. Yeah, it's definitely made my list of considerations.
Gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, maybe let's go down on the range and.
Yeah, are you available? Let's go.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Adam and I are about to go do some shooting.
Absolutely.
Happy hunting and shooting to you. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.